I am so excited, friends, to be able to share an amazing woman who has had an extraordinary career and has so much to teach us all. Please join me in welcoming Patricia Harrison. She's the president and CEO of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a federal nonprofit established by the federal government to actually support public radio and public television. And all our friends know her as Pat. And I'm just so honored and grateful for your time. She's had an extraordinary career. Now, she's not going to brag on herself, so I'm just going to brag on her a little bitty bit. She was appointed by Colin Powell as the Assistant Secretary of State for Educational and Cultural Affairs. She was co-chair of the Republican National Committee. She co-founded the PR agency, the E. Bruce Harrison Company, with her late husband. She's written 2 books, or at least 2 that I'm aware of: America's New Women Entrepreneurs, Tips, Tactics, and Techniques for Women Achievers in Business, and Seat at the Table, an insider's guide for America's new women leaders. Pat Harrison, thanks so much for your time.
Oh, my pleasure, Amy. And I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So we're talking about the dirty F word, lessons we learned from our failures. And when you shared a few with me, I was so excited. Everybody loves the late Colin Powell, and we lost him too soon, but you actually worked for him, with him. And you have a pretty big story from perhaps your early days with him at the Department of State. Could you talk to me a little bit about how you bounced back from that story of failure with Secretary Powell?
Well, I was a new member of the State Department, a political appointee. And as you know, there are foreign service officers, civil servants, and political appointees. And I was appointed by the President of the United States as Assistant Secretary of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And Secretary Powell, every morning, he would have a meeting with the undersecretaries, that's the highest level, and the assistant secretaries. And if you were 1 minute late, that door was not going to open at all. You were outside of the meeting. And you came in, you sat down. The undersecretaries were first around this very long, kind of rectangular, oblong table. And I so very wanted to be part of this group in a positive way. And it doesn't really matter what the issue was, but the secretary would go around the table. And if someone had something to say, all the while he was observing his team. If someone didn't speak for a long period of time, he knew something was wrong. If they dominated the conversation, I didn't know any of this at the time, but in extraordinary zeal to be noticed and be productive, I said, we're dealing with this issue. And he had a shocked look on his face. And the reason he did is because this was a rumor and it wasn't a fact that I presented, I thought, as a fact. And afterwards, he said to me, all right, Harrison, that is mark number 1 on your forehead. And I left thinking, oh my God, I'm never coming back from this, because you have all the members of the Foreign Service at the table who are looking at you, you idiot, and other people. And I made up my mind never, ever to make that kind of mistake again. And to give me, I gave myself 1 year, and I promised myself at the end of the year, I would be a trusted member of his team. And within that year, he appointed me as Undersecretary of Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, in addition to the job I already had, because a vacancy had occurred. So I was acting and in effect reporting to myself, which was a little odd. But we developed a wonderful working relationship, and he would always end it, all right, go ahead and do it. But if you fail, I never met you. So when I left state to come to CPB, he said, okay, Pat, you're going to want to ask me to do something when you go over to public broadcasting. Don't ask me, I'm not doing it. The first week I was there, I called him. I said, Secretary Powell. He said, oh no. I said, yes, we're doing some things with education. And he said, of course, I'll be there. And so we had a long relationship with him, as you know, through America's Promise Alliance and American Graduate, helping young kids stay on the path to a high school diploma. But he was definitely my mentor. and he has 13 rules. And he said, you know, if you just lead with integrity, people will follow you just out of curiosity to see where you're going. Very upbeat, very positive, and he really affirmed the adage. You know, Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Nothing great could ever be achieved, can ever be achieved without enthusiasm." Because if you don't have enthusiasm, you will fail. If you don't believe in what you're doing, you can't attract people to the cause or the initiative. So I was very fortunate to work with him.
Pat, over that time of building back his trust, after that little fobble at the beginning, were there any specific steps that you took to help you come back from that original failure?
Yes, one of the lessons I learned is, you know, don't act on fumes. In other words, because you were successful in a previous position, maybe some of the things that made you don't automatically apply. So for state, in terms of the issues we were looking at, this is right after 9/11, I really needed to drill down, do a lot more homework, understand beyond a surface understanding what was going on in terms of world problems and where my bureau fit in and what we could do. And so I just started I was already getting up earlier, but I found that if I got up just 30 minutes earlier, devoted some time to the reading of the day, and I have to say, most of the people at state, they first turn on NPR and get a lot of their international news from NPR at that time. And just to do your homework. So my rule, my deal with myself is, if I prepare, whether it's for a speech or an initiative, as much as I can, and it doesn't work out, you have to let it go. So that's kind of something that I found works for me all the time. But if I try to shortcut that process, disaster.
No shortcuts, no shortcuts.
No
on the
shortcuts.
bumpy road to success. You know, there's another story that you shared with me about your time with Colin Powell. And it's when you wanted to bring the National Orchestra from Iraq to the United States.
Oh, yeah. That was...
Tell us about that and that potential failure.
Well, we, my bureau, Educational Cultural Affairs, managed thousands and thousands of exchanges from people of other countries coming here on different levels, professional levels, high levels, student levels. In any case, it was a very volatile time. Saddam Hussein had been deposed. They didn't know where he was. And the Iraqi National Orchestra had not played for years. Many of them were in hiding. And working with Michael Kaiser, who was then the head of Kennedy Center, we talked about, would it be possible to bring what was left of the Iraqi National Orchestra to Washington, D.C., and also to work with Yo-Yo Ma and to establish some kind of scholarship and tutorial for them when they came. And I had created an initiative called Culture Connect. And under this umbrella, a group of us, I did tell the secretary, so here's the idea. We're going to go over to Baghdad, and then we're going to meet with the orchestra, and then we're going to fly them back here, and then they'll perform at Kennedy Center. And then we're going to set up this training plan with Yo-Yo Ma. And he said, fine, go ahead. But if you fail, I don't know you. So that was pretty much my directive from him all the time. And we did go to Baghdad and we met these incredible people. And some of them had been imprisoned, others had left the country, come back, and they were practicing with plastic instruments. So we met at this place, undisclosed location. Things were very bad there at that time, and we stayed in the green zone, which was bombed once right before I got there. But in any case, it was successful. They came over. The American people would see them in Starbucks or somewhere else and buy them coffee. And when they went back, the day they went back was the day they found Saddam Hussein. And it was a very emotional greeting for them when they walked into Kennedy Center for their first rehearsal. And there was Yo-Yo Ma just sitting there very unassuming. And then he got up to embrace all of them. They couldn't believe it. And it was a wonderful performance with the president and the secretary and so many people from the Washington community and beyond at Kennedy Center to hear them play the Iraqi national anthem for the first time in many, many, many years.
You know, so many times failure and success are right there side by side.
They are.
Understand and risk plays a part of it. You took a risk to do this, risking your own life to go over there during tumultuous times. Can we help people bond with the risk that is necessary to be successful and deal with if there's a failure along the way?
I think you just can't be that analytical about it, that you have to follow what is your spiritual DNA and what guides you to do these things in the first place. And it's almost as if you can't do them. You have no choice. And I remember trying to tell my husband why I thought it was a good idea to go to Baghdad. And flying in that helicopter and the plane to get there and just all of the different things that happened made me so appreciate our military, so appreciate just what people try to do to keep things together. And so when you do these kinds of things, they change you as well. So you can't think in terms of success or failure, really, because then you would just be, I think, so stymied. You just wouldn't take a step. Once you start thinking, well, what if I fail? I think you can't move ahead with that enthusiasm. You're going to need that because you're going to have to convince other people. And in the convincing, you convince yourself. So, and I had no doubt that the secretary would be behind me 100%, even though he was always telling me, you're on your own, Harrison. And you do need people in your life who are like-minded to the extent that they're not always telling you why things can't be done. I mean, you need sane people, so you don't go out on a limb, but still, you need to find people that enable you to carry out what you feel is your mission, no matter what job you're in.
It sounds like your vision, Pat, as well as your passion, have kind of pulled you towards some things that other people might have called crazy, but you knew it was possible inside of you.
Well, it's what keeps me in, I don't know how to say that life is such a gift, and we're all going through such a terrible, terrible time. But I feel confident that we're going to come out on the other side of this, changed. Some of us have experienced tragedy during this period, but there is a reason for life and for what we're doing, if you believe that. I don't know how you go forward if you don't believe that. So I basically have to believe in what I'm doing or I won't get out of bed in the morning. What's the point? I don't know. Eat chocolates and watch daytime TV, except, if you're sick at home and you watch daytime TV, that will motivate you to get up pretty quickly and get to work.
I want to transition now, Pat, to the personal story that you shared with me. And you have spent your whole career succeeding. And yes, there have been failures on that path to the success and the significance that you've had for so many people, that you've helped so many others have. But when it came to a story with your husband, that's when you really sort of felt a failure that perhaps you hadn't felt before, that you shared.
I did. Part of the problem of achieving at higher and higher levels of what I would say is what is success? Achieving at higher and higher levels of difficulty, and you set the difficulty for yourself, that you think you can do anything. And you may not express that really, but in your mind, I know all of these people. So my husband was diagnosed in 2017 with a very aggressive form of cancer, dermoplastic melanoma. In any case, I go into what I call overdrive, and sometimes overdrive is worse than no drive at all, because whatever's in my path gets run over because I've got my mission and I'm doing this. And so we went to all the best doctors. We went to Sloan Kettering. We had all the information, and I talked to Dr. Fauci, and we then settled on Georgetown and this wonderful doctor at Georgetown, the oncology department. And I thought, all right, I've put all these pieces in place. So of course he's going to live. And we had a period of time during that period between 2017 and he died last January, where everything was static. Nothing was moving, nothing went away. Then he had a biopsy, and then it had moved here and it moved there. I said, well, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? And so he was on different protocols that they had. There's always a price, though, with some of the solutions, let's say. And it depends what your body can take when you're getting these infusions. So radiation can save your life. It can also hurt your bones. Different things occurred. So the side effects that he had, without getting into detail, really overwhelmed him. So when he died, it was as a result of treating the cancer to a certain degree. But the thing I felt is that I should have done something more. So this one person, out of all the history of all the world, would avoid death forever. I mean, irrational, yes, but I think a lot of people who are in a position of caretaking feel this. When the person they're, quote, taking care of dies, what could you have done? So you take on almost this ego-centered approach to life and death, that you're in charge when you never really were in charge. And what we did do, at about 1 o'clock in the morning in early January, I got a call from the hospital. You have to get over here. You have 1 hour to spend with your husband. I said, are you saying he's dying? I mean, I just woke up. Get over here. We'll give you an hour. So I got there, and he was in the ICU, of course. And they said, nah, the hour was up. You have to leave. I said, I'm not leaving. Either you let me stay with my husband, or I'm taking my husband out of here. He's not dying alone. Mrs. Harrison, my kids got involved, and my son called and said, look, you don't know my mom, so we need to think of ways to address this rather than a no, you can't be with your husband. And what we did, with the help of a lot of people at Georgetown, and also this wonderful hospice, the Adler Center in Middleburg, we were able to get Bruce out in the middle of COVID, the height of COVID, to this state-of-the-art hospice in Middleburg, Virginia, where my whole family came in. Yeah, I guess we wore masks some of the time. We had a beautiful 2 weeks before he passed. And I realized it took all these people to help me do this thing. So the caretaker thing can be a lonely role. And you have to include as many people as possible to give up what you think you're in charge of, which you're really not. So, if I write another book, it may be about grief and loss, because in a certain sense, Emily Dickinson wrote that hope is the thing with feathers, and grief can become an anchor, not in a good way, that can sink you to the bottom where it's too heavy, you can't get up. So you need tools to get back to that high energy enthusiasm for life and have those touch points rather than going back to, I have the power of the universe and I could have kept him alive. So I'm looking at that. I'm keeping a journal on that because I think it might help people who are going through, as everybody does. No matter how powerful you are, and no more of a lesson than when I went to General Powell's funeral. And here he had the best doctors, the best, the best, the best. But for every person, there is a season and it comes. You do your best, but so the process of letting go is also an interesting one.
And I think what I'm seeing through all of these stories of your failures and how you've triumphed and come back is just this courage, the courage to stand up. And I suspect during, you had been married, help me, I know it was a very long time.
Oh my God, dog days. I mean, decades. We were married over 40 years, I think. Yeah, 73.
So to have the courage to stand up to these very talented doctors telling you, no, he needs to stay here, but you had to have the courage to take him away.
Well, you know what, Amy, courage is an interesting thing. And if I have any at all, and believe me, it comes and goes. It's like, half full, half empty. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I was surrounded by people, different backgrounds. And most of them, if they were Jewish, they didn't have any relatives because they had been murdered in the Holocaust. And then on my side, they're Italian American. And their attitude was, they didn't go around every day, are you happy, my darling? How do you feel today? That was a different time. And I just saw people with great courage move ahead on behalf of their family. Family was everything. Family, no matter how big you get, as my grandfather would say, you could be a bigger shata. If you don't have your family around you, you're nothing. Okay. And the courage sometimes for people means just getting up in the morning, especially during COVID. And what is your sense of purpose in your life now as everything has been turned upside down? And young parents dealing with their kids, the courage to really be brave for them when you're so terrified about this horrible disease and going to school and getting on buses. And you see these little kids walking around with the masks like it's normal. And the parents are not thinking it's normal. Everybody wants this to be over in a good way as soon as possible. So I think in terms of courage, it waxes and wanes, but what helps me is I get angry at things. So sometimes that's my motivator, injustice, or someone telling me it can't be done. It's like waving that red flag in front of the bull. So I don't know,
As we're running out of time, what do you think pulls all three of those stories together, Pat? What do you see as the common thread woven throughout?
Well, for me, it is my parents who have both passed. But the lesson was each generation has to raise the family level. And they didn't mean monetarily or in terms of accolades or awards or anything. But you have that responsibility that is handed to you. Excuse me. So at the back of my mind all the time, in whatever job or position I have, am I advancing my family? And then it's, am I advancing the greater family of human beings that I come in contact with? So for public media, the mission really means a lot to me. At State, the mission was to ensure mutual understanding, and I substituted respect for understanding between the people of other countries and the United States. Similar to public media, to restore civility, to connect to one another and realize we don't have to agree, but you have to respect someone's right to everything the Constitution promised: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And for me, that's just been my thing with feathers in terms of the hope that we can get to that place. And I have especially great faith in women. We've always known that women always had the talents of a CEO. They just didn't have the title. So I'm always happy to see more women general managers such as yourself, women in leadership positions, because I do think that we bring that extra sort of approach to compassion and humanity, and insights on what it means to respect one another.
So many great lessons, so many great lessons. You know, you've shown, and through all those, I see the drive that you have. I see your motivation, and you're just about to overcome, and you prevail over each of these. What is the one takeaway? Is there one thing before we run out of time that you would say, folks, this is what you got to know about failure? If you can just hold one kernel, it would be this.
Well, it may be more than one kernel. To avoid being destroyed by failure, never, ever compare yourself to someone else. Everyone has their own race to run. Stick to your lane, achieve what you decided you want to achieve. Compare yourself to where you were a month ago, a week ago, and let that be your marker. The minute you start looking at someone else, either in envy or despair, you're taking your eye off your own life, and it's a distraction. So you've got to be very conscious of when you're doing that, because that means you're not paying attention to your own success.
So good. Pat Harrison, President and CEO of the Corporation Republic Broadcasting. Thanks for all you've done. Thanks for the inspiration you've given to me every time you spoke.
Oh, Amy, thank you. This was a wonderful way to spend a Sunday morning.
Grateful for your time. Appreciate you. More life of significance. Now you're past success. You're living a life of significance in all that you do, Pat. And so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Let's talk soon.